A woman is more. She is a sun ray to flowers that bloom. Find her in God's hands. No longer silent. In God's hands. No longer silent.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of No Longer Silent, where we bring you stories of women in the church who have gone through some impossibly painful situations but have triumphed. My name is Navita Milton Riley. As per usual, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then we're happy that you are now a part of this movement. If you're a returning listener, then we thank you for your love and for your continued support. My guest on here tonight or today, whenever you are listening to this podcast, is very near and dear to my heart. And I know I sound a little bit impartial, but that's because she is my sister. Her name is Sophia Frazer, and we both grew up in the church together from St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, until migration. And we are both living in Georgia. We attend the same church in Georgia. And so I'm very happy that she's on here with me tonight because she is and has been one of my number one supporters. And I am just so happy to have her. Sophia, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on here with you.
All right. So since we've already gotten the introduction and everything out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and just talk about what you came on here to share with us. So go ahead and tell us your story, how it impacted you, and just how the Lord brought you through your situation.
All right. So thank you, Navita, for having me on here. It's truly a pleasure to serve through this medium, to other women, to others out there who may have gone through or is going through different situations. And just to share that there are people out here who have gone through and came out on top and are still moving on with their lives. And I am a testimony of that. So whenever you're listening, I have about 3 snippets of my stories from the past that I do want to share with you.
Okay.
It's not everything, but I found that these 3 stories are definitely suitable for this type of forum. These are not things that you always want to talk about or express, but I will do my best to share with you what I can to let what the past was like for me. So the first story I want to share was when I was around somewhere between the ages of 8 to 10 years old. For the first roughly 15 years of my life, most of that was spent living with my grandmother. And we had, different people around the neighborhood. She was very kind. She would always share. So people would stop by and get dinner, or sometimes I'll be taking dinner to people. So there was one particular elderly man that he would always stop by, sometimes sit on the porch in the evenings to just, talk.
Mhm.
Or sometimes my grandmother would give me dinner and I'd take it to him. He lived pretty close by. And so my first experience was with him. He was old enough in my grandmother's age group, so he could be my grandfather. Um, what he started doing was whenever we were at a place where it was he and I alone. So say, for example, I'm in the backyard and he's anywhere in the area and he sees me, what he would do is take out his private part and basically start, shaking it in front of me. Not that he was in my face, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the first, those are the, that's the first thing he would do. And I mean, I found it really weird. I didn't really understand why I was doing it. I was pretty young. And then there were times when he would come by and he would sit on the porch with my grandmother talking in the evening times. And as a little girl, I'd be there in the yard playing and he would call me to sit on his lap. And my grandmother didn't really say anything. And as you know, you're taught to be to have manners and good behavior. And so if he says, come sit on my lap, then I used to do it as a little girl. And it was in those moments that the fondling started. He would be right there. I'm sitting on his lap, and my grandmother is across, on the other side of the porch, and they're talking. And this man would be touching me, fondling me. And then there were instances when I would bring food or whatever she would give me to take to him, and he would make sure that he stay inside. So when I bring it up to him and I go on the porch, he could easily pull me inside, and there also he would do the fondling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really confused. I didn't really understand what was happening or why he was allowed around to do those things to me. And the fact that family members were there. um, I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do in terms of, if I was to say something, they would say that I'm lying, or, because he was, such a good friend with my grandmother, if it would cause a problem. And so I didn't really say anything. There was one particular day I was in the backyard, I was washing dishes, and he did the same thing where he would, show his private part. And an older family member came up that day and saw him and started cursing at him. And that's when my grandmother realized what was happening. And at the time, I can say I honestly didn't understand what was happening to my little mind, what I was being exposed to. I didn't know at that time if it was okay or if it wasn't okay, because nobody was talking about those things. And so that was like the first exposure I got to those type of sexual actions. And then at the age of about 13, 14, I had another exposure with another older person. So we had this big group of young people at church that we would do everything with. Since we were younger, we would do church games and outings and all of
Yeah.
these things together, fasting, whatever it was we were doing, even, cleaning the church and stuff like that. So whenever we did those things, there was always a bunch of us hanging out, talking, laughing, joking around. And we really enjoyed those times. But here was this person in the group that knew me from I was much younger and watched me over time. My body started changing. Um, as I got a little bit older, preteen, early teens, and I started to understand more about, a little bit more about life and having conversations, we became really good friends. He would share a lot of stories with me, and I would, tell him my little experiences, whether it is going to school or whatever was happening. We would talk about a lot of things. And the person would also encourage me in the Lord. But there was one particular instance where, he really came on to me and was, touching and kissing. And um, that actually happened, multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, yes, I know what was happening, but in my mind, he was my really good friend, and I did not want to lose that friendship. And so I didn't say anything or I didn't react in a bad way. I just allowed it to continue. And eventually it stopped. I don't remember if the person moved away or what happened, but eventually it did stop. And then the third story, this time I was about 14, and I was going to an all-girls school at the time. And the school was a boarding school, and my parents couldn't really afford for me to stay on campus. So I stayed with family friends that lived closer to the school. And one of the houses that I stayed, the lady had a son. He was about maybe 1 to 2 years my senior. So he wasn't an adult, but um, older nonetheless. And I remember how the house was set up. It was 2 floors. So his room was downstairs, and he would have to come up the back steps and um, come around on the side to even get to where I was, or go through the back door.
Mhm.
And we used to sleep with the windows open. And one night I was sleeping, and in my head, I felt like I was dreaming, like I was in water, but I didn't realize that the boy was, I guess I'd call him a boy at the time, in my bed touching me. But then I woke up and I realized that I wasn't dreaming. Somebody was actually there touching me. And I told him, if you don't get out of my bed, I'm going to scream. And so he got up, and he went through the window and went back down to his room. And when I went home that holiday break, I told my mom I didn't want to go back. And she asked me for days and days, why don't you want to go back? And I wouldn't tell her. The night before I was supposed to go back to school, she, like, kind of got upset at me, like, you need to tell me why you don't want to go back. And then I finally told her what happened. And she said to me, you don't have to go back. And so I started taking the really long ride to school. It was hard, but I still, I went to school every day, came back home every day from that point on. And to be honest with you, it was even around that same age group that another person actually tried that with me, and then something really drastic happened. The person passed away. And so it was so many different times that I was touched or fondled, or um, sexually abused, is what it really was. And it did so many things to my mind, and a lot of decisions, or a lot of things I allowed to happen to me. I realized that if I was looking for attention, and so it's even decisions that I made after all of that happened to me. I didn't realize that I was looking for whatever I felt, and didn't realize that it wasn't a good thing at the time, or just overall decisions that I made, that maybe I could have done things differently if I wasn't exposed to those things so young, and what was going on in my mind. But as I got older and I really learned more about the Lord and His Word, I mean, I learned a lot growing up, but my understanding really opened up, like late teens into early 20s, when it comes to the Word and what God requires, and even moving to America, and just learning more about the words of God. In Jamaica, there's so many things that I saw when it comes to older men and young girls that seem to be okay and allowed. And so it just seems like everything was okay with what was happening to me. But, coming here and realizing how strict they were in terms of age, if you're under 18, you're a minor. And if you're over 18, you're an adult. How much more stringent they handle these things here in America. I realized that through all that time, I was really a victim. My mind was messed with, my body was messed with, and it affected decisions that, I really made in those early years of my life. And I am really grateful to God that it wasn't worse. Like, I know a lot of people testify of things like rape and all of that. And, some people end up getting pregnant really early in life, young age, 13, 14, those ages. But I can say, despite all of that happening, God truly kept me. And especially now that I have girls of my own, I realize how important it is as, parents, to really pay attention to neighbors, friends, people that you trust your kids with, places that you send them. It's really important just to pay attention all around, because you never know who's going to do what. And some of the times it also doesn't even matter if it's people that say they're in church and they worship God. You still have to pay attention. You still have to take those precautions when it comes to your children. And those experiences really taught me a lot that has helped me even in my journey as a parent. And, switching over to that being a positive thing, through those different experiences, I learned that yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was victimized, but I realized that God's love and his mercy and his grace truly kept me. I am now married going on 15 years. I have
Wow.
4 girls, um, happily married, and I live a true life for God.
Mhm.
Those things that happen to me don't impact my decisions right now. There was a time in my life when they did, but now because I am determined to live for the Lord and make the right choices, I
Yeah.
realize it's really mind over matter. So I could sit back and say, oh, all these things happened to me. And so, I'm no good, I'm this or I'm that. But no, I learned that there's a true life, a happy life that you can live in Christ, understanding that he sees you for the daughter that you are, and not just a little girl with a body, growing breast or whatever to be touched and fondled for somebody's pleasure. God sees us way above that. And so because I've come to look at myself through the eyes of God and through his word, um, I'm not going to tell you that I don't think about those moments and sometimes they don't make me sad, but there is worship and joy when I realize that I've risen above that.
Yeah.
I've risen above being victimized. I've risen above the pain. I've risen above the bad choices. And now on a daily basis, I make conscious choices because I know the word, because I know God, and because I know I'm an overcomer. And so I'm truly glad to share that part of the story with you as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was truly powerful. And just to know that so many things can happen in our life journey, but it doesn't have to stop us from living a fulfilling life. And just for us to know that God is truly a protector and he's truly a keeper. And sometimes things happen. We're not saying that it won't happen. Sometimes it does. But I am truly grateful for the perspective that you were able to share tonight, because so many times we see it all the time because we grew up in the church where all of us are growing up together as kids, and it's fine and it's okay when we are 5 years old and 6 years old. But as soon as we start to get into like 9 and 10 years old and puberty starts to take place, certain things start to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we see these things and we think that it's innocent because guess what? All of us grew up together,
Yeah.
but it is important, as you said, that parents and we are using this opportunity to appeal to parents to watch out for these signs. And when your children starts to get older, then you need to ensure that your vision is 2020 right now when you are looking out for them, because
Yeah.
a lot of times a older brother in the church will just walk up to a sister and just hug them a certain way and their breast is touching up on them and they don't think that anything is wrong with that. We see these things all the time. And I am grateful that you came on and you shared and you tied that into your story and into your testimony, that no, you have that experience and you have that notion to watch out for your children and for your girls and even for other children. in the church. And as we spoke, I just wanted to bring in some of the things, some of the symptoms, or some of the behaviors that we might see our children displaying when they are being abused, some of the things that we can look out for, that might raise an eyebrow to say, I need to inquire what this is. You mentioned some of them, and I just want to tie in some of them with this. It says, withdrawal from friends or usual activities. If you see your child being withdrawn, changes in behavior such as aggression or hostility or anger. Sometimes they take it out on another sibling in the home. Frequent attempts of running away. Sorry, that is another one. Being rebellious or defiant, wanting to self-harm, attempting suicide. These are some of the things that we need to be paying attention to. Sometimes when our child they're very angry and just rebellious, it's not because they're just a bad child. Sometimes it's coming from somewhere, and we owe it to our children to inquire about these things when we see them. And that is the story, that is the message that you're leaving with us tonight.
Yes.
And so before we close out, I always read something befitting to my guests. But before I get to that part, is there anything that any last words, anything that you want to say to parents or to children regarding sexual abuse, or to just anybody that is listening regarding sexual abuse and safeguarding your children from this?
I want to say that whether we want to acknowledge it or not, sexual abuse is real. It's real in children. Sometimes we shy away from having the conversation or even wanting to hear it. For me, it was those things in my day, they were hush hush. And so anything of that nature that came about, as a child, you were either told not to say those things or not to lie and what have you. But parents, one thing I have learned with raising my children is to ask direct questions.
Yes.
Sometimes if you just ask them, are you okay? You'll get yes. How was your day? It was okay. And they limit those answers just to what you're asking them. So sometimes it's not even a matter of asking, the open-ended question where they can just give you a short response. Be direct about what you're asking. So with my children, I'll ask them, has anybody touched you, or done this or done that? I'm very specific now because I've learned with them that they don't always come forward with these things. It's because they're hard to talk about. They're awkward, and it's embarrassing. And so be direct about the questions that you ask your children, and don't worry about it being explicit, because guess what, as explicit as some things may sound, they're happening, and they're happening to our children. And so be very direct and blunt. You know how, what tone to ask it. And if you're asking it defensive, you may not get, if you're asking in a certain tone, you may not get the answer you're looking for. So be conversational, but be direct about what you're asking your children. And some of them may not say anything. So you also have to pay attention to those signs, them being defensive, and, the aggression, the withdrawal, all those things are really true signs that they may be going through. And also just practice having regular conversations with your children, make them feel comfortable talking to you, because then when these things come about, it will be easier for them to share with you, as opposed if you don't normally have a conversation with them, for them to just, come up and tell you. And the last thing I do want to share is, for those of you who have a past where you've gone through these things, or you're even struggling with them now, just know it's not the end of the road. There's bigger and better things ahead. And um, in all that you're doing, learn to pray to God about these things, as well as seeking help or people that are encouraging or will give you good advice. Because I had people around me. I was praying, people were praying for me, and I had those around me who were truly encouraging and gave me good words of encouragement. People who were able to lift me up. Those were some of the things that truly helped me to rise above how I felt, rise above my pain, and to know that there is a better life, there is a better way, and that God can deliver from any of these situations, no matter how insurmountable it may seem, no matter how difficult and painful. God is able to bring you through and give you a testimony that you can share with others who might come after you, because it's not the first time these things are happening, and they will happen again. So as you build your story, be prepared to share as well, to help someone out of what they're going through.
All right, thank you. That is the sad reality, but it is the truth. As we close out, I just want to share from the words, because you spoke so strongly about the words and how it really helped you. So I'm going to share from Psalm 139, verse 14, 17, and 18.
I knew it was coming.
I think you already know.
It was coming.
Yes. It says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes,
Marvelous are thy works, and
yes,
that
Lord.
my soul knoweth right well.
Amen.
Verse 17 says, how precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. 18, if I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee. When I heard you talking, that was the first scripture that came to my mind, that God, he thinks very highly of his children. And
Yes.
he only wants to give us an expected end, as Jeremiah says. And so
Amen.
all we have to do is trust him, and to trust that there isn't anything in this world that he doesn't have a handle on. Thank you so much, Sophia, for joining me for another episode of No Longer Silent.
You're most welcome.
And to all of our listeners out there, from wherever you are joining from, thank you again for your continued support. Until next time, my name is Navita Milton Riley, saying God bless you.
No.